2 months ago, the LCS was thriving. People were really excited about the LCS. And then, and not long after, people are definitely scared for what is about to come for the LCS, especially with a change that has been leaked, I guess you could call it. We'll get into that in just a second. LECS, LEC rumors starting to come in bunches. Just a small amount right now, but we know that they are coming. J&T and I will get into the ones that have been announced so far. And then we have to dive into the group stage and figure out just how North America had one of its worst showings, maybe its worst showing ever, and went 3-15. This is episode 104 of the Clown Fiesta podcast with Blue Jay and JNT 250, and it starts right now. Before we get into anything, JNT is sick this week. You'll notice he doesn't have his cam on. He's got his little Discord logo there. But JNT is powering through this week so that we can get you guys an episode. So shout out to Jinter for being a boss and running the stream just the same.
I'm a beast.
Yes, you are a beast. Sure. Okay, so JNT, we asked the question: is this change going to kill the LCS? What is the change that we're talking about?
Well, I guess it was on Monday now that there was a rumor. I don't know if it started on Twitter or Reddit, but where the article kind of originally got posted, but it was basically saying that the LCS might potentially move from the weekends to the weekdays. And if you kind of do a little bit of reading between the lines, the majority of people considered the fact that with the Valorant VCT League starting up in 2023, the belief is that Valorant will be held on the weekends now, and that LoL will kind of be pushed to the side and be played on Wednesday and Thursday.
Yeah, and so you make the point that Valorant coming in and LCS being pushed aside. Now, Travis Gafford made a really informative video. If you somehow haven't seen that yet and you're watching this, would highly recommend going to watch it. It's about 20 minutes and he kind of covers some of these points. He makes it seem like he doesn't think that the move to weekdays for LCS is at all related to Valorant going in on weekends. It sounds like the plans were for the LCS to move to weekdays before that. I'm a little bit skeptic on that. I don't know how you feel about that, J&T. The LCS has been around for a long time and has always done weekends. And not to mention the few times that it did try like the Friday night league thing. Yes, I know the majority of games were on weekends still, but when they did Friday night league and Monday night league, not a lot of success with those. Pretty significant drop off. And I understand the first thing to say when we talk about that is like not all teams were playing on Fridays and not all teams were playing on Mondays. So, for example, if you were a Team Liquid fan and Team Liquid was playing on Saturday and Sunday, then you wouldn't have tuned in on the Friday or the Monday, right? And so I understand that it's not the exact same thing. And now all of the games, in theory, will be played on Wednesdays and Thursdays. But I still think that with how bad viewership was on those days, it's hard to be excited about this change as an LCS fan or viewer.
Yeah, well, I do think that the Friday night and Monday night league experiments, can be sort of a metric to evaluate potential Wednesday and Thursday viewership numbers in terms of games. I don't think it's like exactly sort of a copy paste thing, mainly
Hmm.
because I don't remember if it was Friday or Monday, but I think it was Monday. They only did 2 games.
Yes, it is different.
So part of that had to do with, sometimes, the scheduling would call for some pretty terrible games on that Monday. And, your Monday quote unquote primetime games would be like Dignitas versus Immortals and TSM versus CLG. And to be honest, you don't want to take 2 hours out of your most likely busier Monday to watch those games, partially because people are going to be working, people have school, people's evenings are going to be occupied by their work or school or just pure relaxation because they've had a full day. And I think part of that is what is going to carry to potential weekday viewership is if you're going to school or you're going to work, you're going to want those late afternoons and evenings to relax, and your top priority might not to commit yourself to, I guess in this case, if they're fully moving the whole schedule, 5 hours of your evening, like you're going to take your entire, rest of your day to purely watch League. I don't think people are going to want to commit to that.
I'm gonna want to get back to the 5 hours point later. I have some opinions on that. We'll get to that in a little bit, but I think those are all fair points, right? Because yeah, not everyone wants to watch Immortals Dignitas, and I mean maybe Maybe this would be a good opportunity to get rid of those teams since the rumor is they are willing to be sold or something along those lines. But I guess that's a discussion for another day. Now, some of the discussion around this is that it could be better for some viewers because one of the potential reasons is that LCS viewers are getting older, and that they don't have as much free time on weekends anymore. And so maybe they would watch LCS when they come home from work or something like that. My only issue with that is like if the argument is people are, LCS fans are more at work now and they're going to be, able to watch after work. I don't see the world where if you have a family, for example, you get off work and you just suddenly watch LCS. Like the day doesn't just stop when work stops if you're an adult and you have a family, right? You got to get food on the table for dinner or whatever it is. And so I wonder what times they're planning on putting LCS on at because it's not like everything you could just drop everything once work is over. So is that not a concern to you, J&T, about moving to weekdays?
Yeah, I mean, I guess depending on what they schedule will obviously be very telling on what their plan is. Because if they want to sort of turn it into kind of a, like I said, quote unquote, prime time thing, if you start the matches at, let's say, I don't know, 7 or 8 p.m. EST, or, let's just say 7 o'clock EST to make sense
Hmm.
because it's 5 hours, then you run from 7 to 12 EST. And I think that can make some sense. But let's just say they did it from, 3 o'clock EST in the middle of towards the back end of the workday to 8 o'clock, that's probably a good 3, 4 hours that the majority of people who are doing a normal 9 to 5 plus commute are just not going to be able to watch, or at least not going to
Right.
be able to fully invest themselves into.
And in the other scenario that you mentioned, if they start at 7 o'clock local time, or I guess 7 o'clock EST, let's say, um, have we just forgotten completely that Europe exists? And like, I realize most European fans are LEC fans before they are LCS fans, but I think there is a lot of overlap for both leagues. I think both leagues feed off each other, and I think this change could hurt both, right? For me, I always loved watching the LEC and then being ready for LCS. Like, that's something I've done for a long time. And I think that if you do the later part, 7 o'clock EST, isn't that like, I think there's like a 6 hour difference between here and Berlin. So what are LEC fans gonna stay or European fans gonna stay awake to watch at when the game start at 1 a.m.? I don't think so. So like that's another thing that I think you have to be worried about as well. Whereas like weekends was fine for that. Like there was no big issue because people are willing to stay up later on weekends. So that's another like there is so many like small issues that are on top of each other, which is I think the reason for panic as LCS fans. Like this could get really, really bad.
It just feels like there's no positives. That's the main thing. It's I don't see any positives that are being taken away from moving the LCS from the weekends to the weekdays. Find me one, and I'll be like, okay, cool. That's one. But from what I can tell so far, while I don't see anything like, oh my god, this is fucking I mean, it's not that great, but say like I'm never gonna watch LCS or like I'm not gonna watch LCS. That's probably not true because I guess the both of us were more diehard fans than the average viewer, so we're gonna
Mhm.
watch a lot of the games to begin with. But definitely, if I'm more likely to be busy on the weekdays than the weekends, and there might be scenarios where I have to miss watching the games live that week.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. And I don't know. I guess because there's not a lot of positives, that's why I'm still skeptical about the whole Valorant thing. Even though I know like Travis is a really well informed guy and I respect his opinion a lot. When he says like that was something that was in motion before the Valorant schedule was even a thing, I still am like, are we sure? Because
Yeah, I
I
don't buy
feel like
that
they've
for.
known for a while. Yeah, like I'm skeptical about it, but like I can't sit here and pretend like I know more than Travis does, or I can't sit here and pretend like I know what's going on in the boardroom meetings at Riot. Like I don't. It just feels like there's no obvious positive thing that you mentioned, right? Like nothing significant anyways. There could be some small positives that make you see like, "Oh, I get it, and that's why we're making this change." And so that's why I'm still a little bit like, it kind of feels like they knew Valorant was coming. It kind of feels like they think this is where their viewership is going to come from is for Valorant, and so Valorant's getting that prime time weekend spot. That's the sense I get.
Yeah, I guess the other thing that is I guess I shouldn't say confusing about the matter, but they must have some sort of data to prove that there is a big enough overlap between the LoL viewership and the Valorant viewership to do this.
Hmm. Yep.
Because at the same time, if the viewership was so separate and distinct between one another, I think it would make more sense to just run their two broadcasts at the same time. Because if
Well,
there's
and
not a
then you
big
have to
viewership,
wonder where though, right? Because there you would need more than one location.
yeah, I mean they used to have two, so I don't know if they still have that other one or probably
Yeah, I don't
not,
know
but
either. I don't know either. That's a good
yeah.
point to raise. Who
They
knows whether they still got that or not?
Yeah, I mean, they did used to have two, and they've operated running two at the same time previously, so they have experience doing it, which is, I guess, surprising to see that they don't do that. But I would like to think that they have some good reasons for doing it, and I would hope, or at least I would predict, that they must have some sort of info about the overlap in viewership between both games.
Yeah, yeah, and on top of all of this, the reason why people are also in panic mode is because on top of all this that's happened, it also sounds, and we've heard this for some time now. There's rumors that LCS teams are going to be cutting back on budget as well, and so you kind of wonder if like I don't know, maybe there won't be that star power that brings in a lot of new names. Like, don't get me wrong, not exactly the greatest results in years past, but there was a lot of excitement, for example, when Cloud9 is bringing over perks or whatever it be, right? Or even TL this year didn't pan out, but there was a lot of excitement when you saw that Bjergsen, Hansama, Bwipo, Santorin, and Core JJ were all going to be on the same team. And so you kind of wonder, like, with people pulling back budget, does that mean that like the orgs themselves have kind of been like, it's just not worth investing in anymore? And I'm not saying that they are, going full, we're giving up, but it begs the question.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing that could be problematic is all these, I guess I shouldn't say issues, but all these changes popping up at the same time, presumably negative changes, just because I think we can all agree that teams spending less money on their rosters will just result in less hype for those rosters because it's more likely to be older veterans and younger rookies who are unknown quantities rather than these all-star players. It's going to generate less hype before the season, and then we're likely to get less viewership during the season because of the schedule change potentially. So I fear that the decline could multiply because of these multiple changes.
Yeah, and Dirikin in the live chat brings up a fair point as well that I don't think we should just pass over. He says, to be honest, less imports is more hype. Tired of us getting used for money as a region. I see that sentiment quite a bit, actually. There are a lot of North American fans that want North American players to be representing the region, and so less imports is a good thing, depending on who you're asking. However, I do think that with the imports that we did get in the past, there's a lot of hype that North American can finally perform well at Worlds. I know we can all laugh at that now, but I do think that that does generate a lot of hype when you have big signings and whatnot. So it's like I guess you take the good with the bad, right? Because I
Yeah.
do think there is some reason to be excited about seeing more North American players represent North America.
Well, I would say that in terms of using the word hype, like having a player like Hansama, you know, despite his poor performances, there was so much excitement and, positive feelings towards the Team Liquid roster going into the season, during the
Yep.
season, and then even during his rough performances. To be honest, I mean, maybe this is just me talking, but I don't really care if, Arrow and Neo and Wild Turtle are performing poorly because that's what I expect from them. And I couldn't really care if an NA rookie comes in and performs poorly because I'm expecting that to happen. But when Han Sama comes in and performs poorly, it's like, oh shit, like this is a big story to kind of follow throughout the season. And I feel like that was a big story throughout the entirety of the season was Han Sama performing poorly. And I feel like that just doesn't have the same traction if it's just insert random NA player. And
That's
yes,
true.
those random NA players hopefully could turn into better players down the line and more name value players, like name brand value players. But to begin with, imported veterans are always going to be more exciting and gain more traction than any NA player. It's just that NA player is going to have to go through the gauntlet of the first couple years in the LCS and hopefully turn into all-star players like a Blabber, like a Danny, like a JoJo.
And to argue the other side, point to Inspired, right? Like Hansama didn't work out, but but Inspired was our best player this year.
And he's probably one of the most talked about players this whole year.
Yeah, that too. So I think that's one of the issues that you get with imports is that you really don't know what you're getting, and things can go in complete opposite directions. Whereas I would say that Inspired and Hansama were both talked about as either the best or one of the best in their roles before coming to North America, and then they just completely fork in the road, went different directions, right? So that I guess it's hard to know um, what you're getting. Um, the other thing I'll add on to this whole discussion as well is that it feels like North America, because we talked about how there was the LCS is thriving meme, and some people looked at it in a good way and some people looked at it in a bad way. But there was a lot of hype around the league that it was finally starting to get better, and it feels like it was just too little, too late to convince Riot to keep the same schedule, right? I think there was a lot of support from the community that this past summer split, was one of the best that we had seen in a long time. There was so much excitement, there were storylines. Uh, on top of all that, we got really lucky and had a bunch of 5-game series, which added on to the already exciting summer regular season as well. And it just feels like the too little, too late. Because what happens is, or what I think happens is, a lot of the perception from fans, it takes a long time to change that perception. So one split that was really, really good wasn't enough to convince Riot that, hey, let's stay the course with how things are going now because we had one good split. And it feels like they had probably already committed to trying to change things up, even though the LCS was starting to have success from viewers and from the community side of things.
Yeah, and I would also argue that the majority of that talk also started during the playoffs. So,
No, definitely not, man. I remember seeing LCS's thriving signs in the stands before playoffs.
well, I just in terms of the season being exciting, and I would me personally, I would attribute the playoffs to a lot of that.
Gotcha.
So
So you're
if
saying that even though like the regular season was good, do you think a lot of the excitement around the LCS was mostly playoff driven, you're saying?
yeah, and
From your point of view?
well, I guess what I also mean by that is if you're looking at Riot's perspective and they're going through this sort of decision making process, it might have already been too little, too late. Like it could have been week 8, week 9 of the summer split, and they'd be like, okay,
Yeah.
we think we're going to go ahead with these changes, and then it's like, oh, the hypest playoffs ever just happened. Well, it's a bit late for that now.
Yeah, no, that's totally possible because that I mean, a lot of people were saying that these rumors have been around for a long time. And one of the points that I got to give Travis as well is that like the messaging from the LCS is nothing. And that's something that he talks about a lot, and I completely agree, is like, why does this have to get leaked from someone? Like, can't the LCS come out and say what the changes are going to happen? Because and that's his point, is that now it obviously looks like Valorant is pushing the LCS aside, because they're saying nothing, which looks bad on the league as well. Mind you, I don't think any messaging for me personally would have changed my opinion on it. I still think that it does look a lot like Valorant is pushing the LCS aside, but I mean, who the hell knows? One thing I do know is that if the LCS comes out and explains why they're doing such things, I think that looks a lot better on the league rather than just waiting for uh, leaks to happen and waiting for the community to decide exactly what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I do want to move on, but there's just a couple of other things that we should probably talk about as well. You mentioned earlier that like people don't want to invest 5 or 6 hours into an LCS broadcast. And that to me is something that I think is has been a continued issue since the LCS started, I don't know, losing popularity, what, like 6 years ago, maybe? And I honestly think that now, well, first of all, not only are you asking people to invest 5, 6 hours of their time, now that's even harder to do during the week. So we kind of talked about that. But there's also the rumors that a couple of teams are looking to sell their spots. And I wanted to ask you, JNT, do you think this is a good opportunity for the LCS to drop to 8 teams? Now, I'm not saying they will,
Oh,
because I think you have
Jesus.
to. I think you have to pay off these organizations to do that. But do you not think that the league would be more successful if, rather than Dignitas or Immortals sold, Do you not think the league would just be more successful if there was just two less teams and that you had one less game to play every day or every week or whatever?
Maybe, but I think that's a one-way ticket to becoming a minor region.
Why is that? Just because you need a certain amount of teams to be a major region, you think?
Um, yes, and presumably, if the Riot is going to go ahead with that, that just means that they're going to be putting less resources into the LCS.
I don't think the number of teams would indicate would should dictate one way or another if you are more or less of a major region. I don't think that at all. And I also think that it is a lot easier to consume the product if you don't have to watch teams that are unpopular and don't do anything, such as those two teams. And so I actually think that it would be a lot easier to make the shift to weekdays if the whole broadcast was a lot shorter.
I mean, if they should just do it over instead of 2 days, do it over 3 or 4 days. That's what they should do.
Yeah, and then now you're asking people to commit a lot more days to watching the LCS, right? It's not a complicated, or it's not it is a rather a complicated issue, and there's no easy solutions here. But I think asking people to commit more days to watching the LCS is a really tough sell as well.
Yeah, I think it's. I don't know. I can somewhat understand the sentiment that some people say it'll be easier for them to consume the LCS on the weekdays. It still just doesn't really make any sense to me. I don't see how people want to say that they have more free time. Not that they have more free time, but that they would rather watch LCS during the weekdays and use their free time, doing that on the weekends rather than doing that on weeknights. So yeah, I don't know. It's just
Okay, and
it's
then
just
one last
weird.
thing I want to get back to before we move on. We mentioned how it looks like teams are cutting back budget or whatever, and now there's the news that Papa Smithy looks like he's going to be leaving 100 Thieves, and his reason being, let me find the thing in his long announcement, he says after multiple rounds of talks with management before Worlds, it was clear that the shared vision of the kind of League of Legends program we wanted to build together in 2019 no longer fit the goals and aspirations of 100T for 2023, which is like another. So we already knew that TL was going to be cutting back budget. Now 100 Thieves. These are two of the premier teams in our league that we're looking to spend and try to make these really good teams that could push for better results at Worlds. I know again XD, um, but that's another worrying sign I think people have with the LCS as well, which is in culmination with all of the LCSs changing their schedule and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, Papa Smithy, obviously a big name, leaving 100 Thieves. I can understand. You kind of got to do a little bit of reading between the lines with the statements that both parties put out in terms of the quote you just talked about, in terms of them not sharing each other's vision anymore. And I wonder, what exactly that means. If it was, Papa wanted to blow up the roster and sign a bunch of premier new players, or if Papa wanted to keep the roster, maybe switch out only one or two players. Obviously, if you keep the roster and switch out a couple players, that probably means you're going to still be carrying a very high budget on a year-to-year basis for that
Hmm.
roster. And maybe 100 Thieves is like, hey, fuck it, we're going back to budget mode. We're going season 9. So
And that's my guess, honestly. It's just a guess, but if you're Papa Smithy, you want to fucking win, right? You want to win. And I think the roster they have is not cheap. And I think it is in big part to we had the North American Worlds. I think that's where a lot of people were. That's why there was so much justification for large spending. And I don't think we're going to be getting that anymore. And what Papa Smithy is probably thinking, again, I'm not in his head here, so I don't want to decide for him, but he's probably thinking, can I really commit myself to an organization that isn't ready to win right now? It's hard to stay motivated for a team that's not looking to win, right? And not doing everything they can to win. And if that's the case, I don't blame him. Now again, maybe we'll find out more and find out that it could be different. You mentioned how maybe he wanted to blow up the roster and go with all young players, and 100 Thieves wasn't looking to do that. Totally possible. We'll have to wait and see if we learn more about it. But um, I don't blame any GM for stepping away or not re-signing or whatever if the vision isn't shared. I think that's very, very obvious.
yeah, I don't, I don't really have a lot more to add.
Yeah. Okay, and so yeah, I guess If there's any more news about what the LCS is looking to do or change anything, we'll certainly talk about it in future episodes. We're going to get into the group stage discussion in just a second. Before we do, remember to hit the subscribe button, guys. If you're enjoying the content, hit the like button, leave us a comment. We do always enjoy hearing from you guys. I apologize, last week I wasn't really able to reply to any of the comments because I was away and wasn't really keeping an eye on the video. This week coming up, I will be looking at comments. So if you guys have anything, any feedback you want to share with us, please leave that for us. It helps grow our channel a lot when we get those likes and subs and whatnot. So please consider doing that. Another thing is, JNT and I are going to be doing another prop sheet. If people are wondering what the hell that is, it's kind of like World's Pick'ems this year, right? I'm sure there's a lot of you that have done your World's Pick'ems and they're already kind of screwed up. Have no fear. You will have another opportunity when World's Finals comes around. We do a prop sheet for that, and it's free to enter, guys. We will have a money prize. We don't know what it is. If you guys want to help contribute to it, you can donate or sub to our channel on twitch.tv/Clown Fiesta Podcast. That's where we get the funding from that, to have a fun little prop sheet. And that way people don't have to spend money if they don't want to, and they can enter and maybe win, right?
It's
So we'll
free
be
to
having,
enter.
yeah, it's free to enter, and we'll have more info once we get closer to finals.
You
But
can
yeah,
only win money. It's free and you can win.
precisely. Do you remember what our prize pool was last time?
We usually do about $100.
Yeah, we do like $75 for first place and 25 for second or something.
Yep.
We'll have to see how much money right now we have from donations and whatnot over the last couple of months, but it's probably somewhere around the same area. And yeah, whoever wants to help contribute to grow the prize pool, feel free to do that. Now, let's get into group stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we starting, JNT 250?
Maybe we could just go down Group A. Obviously, not the dream that everybody was hoping for. Obviously, Cloud9 winning the first game of Week 2 against Fnatic brought the hopium back into everybody, but they quickly got their hopes and dreams smacked down by EDG shortly after.
It did bring a lot of hype. I don't think I've ever heard people go so batshit crazy for a tier 2 tower being taken down, let me tell you. That was actually hilarious. But yeah, I mean that, yeah, we won one game, but it was still a dark cloud, no pun intended, for the most of the rest of the group, right? The only thing for me that made it feel a little bit better was that Fnatic maybe looked even worse than Cloud9 in week 2. But that's some copium shit right there. This group was very, very clear that we had two good teams and two bad teams, and that's pretty much what decided who moved on.
Yep.
Any specific performances that stood out to you, J&T, as like this guy was beast or this guy wasn't beast?
Yeah, I mean, T1's bot lane is just, they're insane. I know they sort of had their struggles throughout. I mean, they kind of started around MSI, and then there was some struggles in the bot lane, specifically Guma and Summer Split. And he seems to be like old Guma again. They're looking really, really strong. I think people still recognize Keria as one of the best players in the world, although I think Chovy's kind of nabbed that spot, either him or 369, going into this tournament. But Keria, he's still quietly up there. I mean, he's playing a lot of Yuumi, but that champion's broken, so don't know why that champion even gets through the pick and ban phase. It's disgusting.
He had the Soraka game too that looked pretty damn good. I'm liking the Soraka, man. I think people are looking really, really good with that champion in the tournament. And then Zeus' GP was also kind of beast as well. I think that was kind of what secured the win versus EDG.
Yeah, that was in
Um,
in the last game of the group.
Yeah, I think that game was mostly just Keria and Zeus kind of carrying the game, but I think you could still look at all the players on T1 and expect them all to have their carry performances as time goes on. So I think they are still definitely a pick that a lot of people are going to have as a potential contender. That's no big surprise. Another guy to shout out, Mako, that Thresh, man. Uh, I like seeing Thresh picked. I think it's a lot of fun. And what can I say? It's nice when the player playing Thresh actually is a fucking monster on it, and he was. So he's another guy that you gotta give props to as well. He basically shit on Cloud9 with that pick.
Yeah, the EDG fans, they were fucking loud
Yeah.
at the venue. I mean, the Chinese representation at Worlds is like really, really strong. It was, I
Yep.
think, you know, there's a large difference. Like obviously NA was number one in terms of like cheers and reception
But
at the
not
event.
by a mile, right?
Yeah,
Like,
no,
not
dude,
by a landslide.
China was like right there at number two. Like
Yeah.
they were so far ahead of the LCK as well. Like LCK fans are usually pretty loud, but the if I had to if I had to give it a ratio, it was like 5-1 in terms of like the loudness of Chinese fans to Korean fans.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you're right. Um, Other players to point out, I guess we pointed out more of the positive sides. I guess we gotta look at the negatives. A lot of discussion around Fudge. I think that carried over from week one into week two as well. I'm just gonna reiterate what I said last week. Look, I know I think he looked better when he played the Ornn, right? And that was when they got the win.
Yeah, that was against Fnatic as well. So
And so I think, yeah, I think there's a lot of people being like, see, if you just put him on a tank, like, and I think that's so
yeah, that's some dumb
short-sighted.
shit.
Yeah, I think that's very short-sighted. I still will reiterate, I have no problem with Fudge trying to take the counter pick and trying to win the fucking game. I am tired because so many times in years past, we've seen people just play the slow ass shit. How long has Ornn been a good pick for North America, right? Forever, and we still get shit on playing Ornn at Worlds. So I don't mind him trying the carry matchups. He got outplayed by better players, man. That's going to happen no matter what you pick. And the game that they did win, it was not because he was on Ornn. It was because, well, honestly, the whole team outplayed Fnatic, not just in the top lane. It wasn't like, oh, we picked Ornn, so we won. No. Hillisang kind of ran it down. Jensen had a really nice shockwave. And I think that fight over at Rift Herald kind of solidified the win for Cloud9. So yeah, I think that all the Fudge focus, while I do think there is some reason to say like he could have been better, I think there's a lot of dogpiling on Fudge.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I don't understand is, I mean, people obviously have a short-term memory when it comes to like good and bad performances, especially when you're getting shit on at Worlds. But when Fudge was smurfing at MSI 2021, and even when he was playing well at Worlds 2021, he was playing carry champions. And when Cloud9 was succeeding in the playoffs, this split where they went to finals and won finals, Fudge was playing a lot of carries. He was the guy who was picking these aggressive counter matchups into the broken Aatrox. I mean, I guess it wasn't as good as it is on the Worlds patch, but he was the guy who was picking Fiora into Aatrox, Kennen into Aatrox. So I don't understand why people are like, just put this guy on takes. He can't play the carries. Like, bro, he was
Well,
playing carries for the last 2 years.
yeah, and why have Fudge on your team if you're just gonna put him on tanks, right? Why don't you have Impact on your team if that's what you want to do? I don't know. To be fair though, like the criticism about Fudge is fair. It's just I don't think it's fair for the picks, right? Like when you're losing
Oh
both
yeah,
sides
for
of
sure.
matchups,
No,
when
no,
you're losing both
100%.
sides of the same matchup, I think that it's totally fair to give criticism. I just think that people are dogpiling and going way too far with the criticism as far as like champion picks or
Yeah,
drafting is concerned.
good clarification because I'm not trying to say that he should be removed from any criticism, but the
Yeah.
specific point of just put him on tanks, that is just so idiotic.
Yeah. And then Fnatic, my God, man. Uh, was there anywhere where they looked good? I'm trying to remember.
Wonder was like kind of solid for the most part in the tournament. He was probably the only player who I thought was playing consistently okay. I guess from week one to week two.
Yeah, because week two felt pretty disastrous.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember correctly, like their bot lane mainly was not performing very well in week two,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Razork wasn't either. But
Yeah, Razork had a
he didn't have the greatest year in totality.
yeah, I agree. There were times where it looked like he was finding his own and then
Yeah,
it
his
just fell
Jarvan game
apart.
against Cloud9 was absolutely tragic.
Yeah, like I want to be happy that Cloud9 picked up the win, but I can't ignore that Fnatic didn't look so good on the other side, and Razork was a big part of that. So we'll see what changes are to come for Fnatic because it sounds like there's a lot of rumors happening there, um, or that have not yet been released from the European side of things. Should we hop over to Group B now?
Yep, Group B. We had a tiebreaker in this group with GDG taking the top spot in really actually back and forth tiebreaker game. It was looking like Damwon
Yeah,
was going to win that one, but GD snatched victory from the jaws of defeat.
yeah, that it was so weird to have an Aphelios and a LeBlanc like really, really fed and still unable to carry the game. Like not unable because the players were bad, unable because it just looked like the draft that they had didn't work out in that particular game. Because you had if LeBlanc wanted to go in, there was a Nautilus that could answer, right? If LeBlanc tries to dash in, he'll just auto you or ult you, right? Ulting LeBlanc is one of the Nautilus ult on LeBlanc is one of the best ways to lock her down because she's so mobile. Well, guess what? It's point and click. You can't miss, right? And then you could chain CC. So that's one of the issues that Showmaker was having.
Then they had Jungle Nautilus and Vi.
Yeah, exactly.
Same
Yeah,
thing.
for the Aphelios, right? Just
Yeah.
hit R on Aphelios, and there was no real peel. What did they have? They had Leona was the support
Yeah, they
for
had
Damwon,
Leona.
so not exactly the greatest peel. Like, yeah, honestly, just not really that great a peel, right? She can lock one person down for a little bit of time, but Vi's unstoppable when she's ulting, is she not? So,
Yep.
um, not exactly the best thing. And then, not to mention, Aatrox is also insane as well. It felt like for Damwon to win that game, they needed a team fight where they didn't give up one kill. Because as soon as Aatrox got one reset, the fight was over. And he was so unkillable, even with your Aphelios that was super Omega fed. So that was a really, really strange game, but also props to JDG for having a solid draft.
Yeah, JDG looks really, really good. I mean, I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but 369 is a player that everybody was pretty much pegging as either the best player going into the tournament or at least right there behind Chovy. And he's been showing it. He pretty much is winning every single lane and is winning similarly to Zeus and Flandre in Group A, where they're just winning both sides of whatever matchup they're playing against some of these weaker teams, which just naturally proves how good of a player you are and how far ahead you are of the rest of the players in the tournament when you can do things like that, winning both sides of a matchup. So I think, and not specifically related to 369, but the rest of top or not top esports, sorry, JDG has a lot of other strong individual players. I mean, Hope and Missing is a really good bot lane, and Yagao, I think, is another player who non-LPL people didn't really know a lot about, myself included, but he's looking really, really good.
And now, I don't think I'm alone in this, but you let me know, JT. After watching this group, I went away with thinking we got two first seeds here with Damwon and JDG.
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree.
Damwon is looking really, really good. I still think that they have a good chance of taking the whole tournament, but they got a really tough test to start, right? Because I think they're running into Gen G.
Yep.
So we'll get into that a little bit later. But the guy I got to highlight is Canyon, man. Canyon Graves, let's go.
That was so
That
sick.
game was an absolute spanking, man.
Yeah, that was
I
the game
love,
before the tiebreaker game.
and I feel like um when Damwon was on their Worlds run and they won Worlds, there was a lot of discussion about how Showmaker needed another championship to start to be thrown in the GOAT conversation. And I always felt like, first of all, I felt like that was true. Like you needed more championship. But I also felt like if they won another championship, I would put Canyon in the same discussion. Like I really do think that mid jungle, both of them are top tier in their positions and one of the best players in the world, both of them. I love seeing Canyon absolutely pop off, and I don't know. I think he's one of the reasons why I would still consider this team to be a first seed, even though they took the 2 spot in this one.
Yeah, it feels like Damon's success in the rest of the World Championship could pretty much rest on Nuguri not inting,
Hmm.
because it actually does seem that even their bot lane as well and Duck Dom and Kellen are also playing quite well, which I don't think people expected, especially going up against a lot of these stronger LPL bottom lanes. But Nuguri, he's been pretty hot and cold for the most part. Obviously, in that tiebreaker game against JDG, he was piss
Aurelia?
useless.
Was it
Yeah,
Aurelia? Yeah.
yeah, he
Okay.
was pretty useless. And even not including that game, he's been kind of average, I guess, in comparison to some of the other top tier top laners. So it just feels like Nuguri needs to chill, maybe play an Ornn game or two, and let Showmaker and Canyon do the heavy lifting.
Hmm. Now, when we get on the weaker side of this group, G2 and EG, um, I was not as disappointed with EG going 1-5 as I was with G2 going 1-5. Is that fair take?
Yeah, I mean, I guess at the same time, I think people didn't expect Damwon to be as good as they were. So I think therefore G2 naturally had higher expectations because I think people believed that G2 was actually going to be better than Damwon or had a really good shot of finishing second ahead of Damwon. But to me, I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty much going to say this for every single group, so I might as well just say it right now. I just think the East looks so much better than the West this year,
Yeah.
and I don't want to just completely like shit on every single Western team and be like every Eastern team is so good and like they had no chance. But I think part of it is like they just didn't have like a big chance. Like Eastern teams just look super, super good. Like from top to bottom, they're almost winning every single lane. I know there was a stat that I saw on Reddit the other day where it was if a team got a 2K gold lead in a game in the world's group stage, they had a
Yeah.
95% chance of winning the game. And I think a lot of that is attributed to having strong laners, transitioning those strong laning leads into early objectives and dragons and rift heralds, and then snowballing the game through a large gold lead via the Rift Heralds and Tier 2 towers, or soul stacking. It just seems that's just the formula at Worlds right now is, hey, guess what? If we're winning lanes, we're going for early objectives and we're going all out. Like we're seeing constant 5-man team fights around the Rift Heralds and Dragons because they're so important, especially when we have champions like Belveth, who popped up a ton in week 2 groups. Rift Herald is basically like if you get that, you almost win the game. If you get both Rift Heralds on Belveth, it feels like. So I don't know. The East just seems really broken this year.
Yeah, I agree, but I still say that out of all the teams in the tournament, I think G2 had the most disappointing performance. I think they're definitely my pick for the most disappointing because I think people come to expect good things out of G2, and I understand the roster's a little bit different this year, but I mean it's still like you still have the main guys on G2 that you expect to perform for them like Caps and Yankos, right? Um and so I guess that's where there's a lot of hope for this team coming in, and I didn't feel like, especially in week 2, none of their games really like losses always feel bad, don't get me wrong, but they felt really bad. They nearly got perfect gamed against EG, right? Right out the gate. This was a team that G2 stomped all year long. So you kind of think like it should be an upset for EG to even take the win, let alone nearly perfect game. I think there was like one or two kills and then a dragon or something like that.
Yeah, there was a couple
Um,
kills at the end or something.
they got hard stomped by Damwon. That game was over in like 24 or 25 minutes or something. And then the other game, you think things are going well, right? I Flacket is 3-0 on Tristana. And I'm like, okay, this should be going well. And then I have the time here somewhere. Uh Oh yeah. So even though he was 3-0 at 5 minutes, they end up being down 4K gold and a drag that by like I don't even know if it was 15 minutes or something like that. Maybe it was like 18 minutes, somewhere around there. And so you're like the game that should be going their way, somehow they're still in a massive hole. And I don't know how that happens. Despite the fact that the Triss is 3-0, they're giving up drag priority. Like they had a full minute to reset. I went and rewatched this part of the game many times where the Tristan is up 3-0 and I'm like, how are they not getting the drags? They had full time to reset and JDG just walks up and grabs Dragon while Tristan is sitting in the lane farming. Yankos is bot side. Like anyone on that team could have been like, hey guys, let's check drag. And by the way, let's just do drag because we're way ahead. I to me that was so un G2 like that I didn't know what I was watching, and I think that's the biggest reason for my disappointment in G2 is this is supposed to be Europe's, you know, uh, best performing team, I guess. Historically, maybe not this year because Rogue, but historically, this is supposed to be Europe's best performing team, and we've just seen that they're not that team anymore.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely didn't show up in terms of their normal performances at Worlds, and obviously G2 fans are going to be disappointed. But at the same time, with the performances that we saw from Damwon and JDG, I think it was going to be a pretty steep mountain for them to climb.
Fair enough. But I guess when you compare to the other side, like they went 1-5 and so did EG, but I think EG's 1-5 looks so much better. We mentioned last week how like they and the community felt like they should have beaten JDG in that game. Um, uh, even I mean, this is like some copium, but you have to say let's remind people you're playing without your star AD carry. And yes, I know he's been around for a month now. A month is not a long time, guys. It's not. And so when you're playing with a sub, you would think that you would look worse than G2, right? And so that's why, even though I am totally with you in wanting to give the East credit, because I think there is a lot of depth to those regions, I still think that the stinker that G2 put up was a little bit disappointing, and I don't put that same kind of disappointment on Evil Geniuses. I think the expectations were very different for the two squads. Group
Sorry,
C.
I was muted. I was just gonna finish it off by saying EG definitely had, it felt like, not including Rogue, the most respectable performances
Yeah.
from the West. I know Fnatic did have 2 wins, but even in some of their losses, EG felt pretty competitive. But if you look at some of the losses by Cloud9 in weeks 1 and 2, Fnatic in week 2, G2 in week 2, 100T, like some of the games were like basically just stomps, whereas EG for the most part was actually fairly competitive.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't know if I would say that they look better than Fnatic. That's a tough one because I could definitely see that world. I don't really know where I fall on each side on that side of the argument, but definitely comparable. Despite the fact that they had one less win than Fnatic. Let's move on to Group C.
Yep, we had DRX topping the group after a tiebreaker with Rogue. Rogue obviously did end up making it out with 4-3 due to some I don't know what would we call it, due to some luck, due to
Should
some.
we? Let's just start with that then, because I know we're gonna get into it eventually, and I think that's like elephant in the room is that Lucian dies and is not supposed to die, and the Nexus is what, like 2 or 3 autos away from dying.
2 or 3 big autos away, Lucian autos away, not like support autos away.
Yeah, but it was a Lucian though.
It's
You know,
true, but I'm just saying, like,
I think most people looked at that and said if Lucian lives there, which he's supposed to, he kills the Nexus. That's the way I looked at it. And the thing is, we don't know, right? We don't. But that is one of the biggest like disasters if you're running a tournament. Like that's one of the last things Riot would want to see is a bug that looks like it definitely impacted the game. And the thing is, there could be a bunch of bugs that impact the game in like the middle of the game. Of course, the bug had to be at the very end, hitting the Nexus, and then the other team just goes and counter ends the game once they didn't finish the Nexus. Like that is just so disaster in every way.
how long was the bug discovered after the game? Was it the same day or was it the next day or?
I don't know. I don't know, and the question is, I don't know what Riot is supposed to do. I figured the answer is something. They didn't really do anything, but the thing is, I feel like a jackass being like, "I can't believe Riot didn't do anything," and then it's like, "Well, what do you want them to do?" And I'm like, "I don't know."
Yeah, I mean,
Take the win away from Gam?
well, here's the thing that I'll say, which I mean, I'll try not to go too far down the rabbit hole here, but I remember hearing about this bug that happened in a Valorant match where I think it was 12-11, and if you play Valorant, you know, like, you know, if you get 13 rounds, you win the game. And there was a bug that happened in the last round on match point, basically,
Mhm.
where a bug that's not supposed to happen happened, and after the fact, after the match was over, they then replayed the round. So I think
Ooh.
I don't watch a lot of Valorant. I only read about this. I didn't actually watch this, so I'm not completely caught up on the story. But if my memory serves me correct, the team who won the match, and then they went back after and then replayed the last round, and then it went into overtime, and then I think the same team ended up winning the game, but there was
Oh,
a bug
safe.
that they discovered after the match and then replayed the match. So that's why I'm wondering what the timeline is when they found out about this bug with
Mhm.
the top esports scam thing. Because I know that I think it was Vandrel on Twitter who discovered. And for people who don't know who Vandrel is, like, he's the guy who always does those crazy like videos where I'm playing Quinn and running around the map like at light speed, and I'm playing Rammus and running around the map at light speed, and I'm stacking like 50 million Nasus Qs or Cho'Gath ults and shit like that. But I just don't remember if it was like, you know, 20 minutes after, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, or 24 hours. But it feels like they could have chrono braked it maybe if they had enough, if not enough time had passed. But
Couple things. So I don't think he discovered it. I think people said, "Hey, you're the bug guy. Is this a bug?" And he confirmed it was a bug.
Oh, so
So
so random people noticed that the mod in
yeah,
proc or
some other
something.
people noticed it. I believe.
How do you notice
Um,
that?
I don't know.
Like,
I don't know, right? And so that's why. Anyways, we'll get to more of that in a second. What was I gonna say? Um, I'm losing my train of thought here. Oh, you talked about the replaying the Valorant round. The thing is, it's a little different, right? Because the Valorant round, you know exactly where to start the whole round over again. Where do you chrono break that? Because aren't they just going to hit R again? Like it was Karthus ult, was it not? It was Karthus ult that killed him through Hex Drinker, right?
yeah,
So like, isn't Karthus just going to hit R again, and the same bug could happen again?
I guess it could, but maybe it doesn't or something.
Yeah,
Spaghetti
exactly,
code
and
moment,
that's
or
where I don't know. That's why I'm on the side of I don't know what I wanted Riot to do because it feels like there's a chance that bug just keeps reoccurring over and over and over again. And so now what? Do you remake the whole game and you disable Karthus? Or do you disable Hex Drinker? I feel like that would be really bad to disable an item. Like, I don't know. All I know is that it's very interesting and not for good reasons. It's disaster because they probably well, do they get out of the group? Or is it just a tiebreaker? It's probably a
they
tiebreaker, right?
yeah, I think they would then there would have been a three-way tie for first.
Yeah. And we could also talk about how even though Rogue got out of this group, they did not look particularly great in week 2 either. Like the European struggles in week 2 were pretty similar to North America's struggles in week 1, except week 1 was good enough for Rogue that they were able to climb out of the group regardless, right? Because I think Europe went 1-8 in week 2. Um,
Yeah,
not much different from the 0-9,
yeah,
I
pretty
suppose.
much getting 4 wins is an almost guarantee to get out of the group. And obviously
Yeah.
there is the one scenario where there's a three-way tie for first place, and that almost happened because Top Esports did have that 3-0, or almost had that 3-0 week 2. Unfortunately, dropping that game to Gigabyte, or sorry, GAM Esports now. Dude, they'll always be the Gigabyte Marines. This GAM
Yeah,
Esports shit
I
can't
still
run.
I still call them. Yeah, I'm with you.
But eh, Rogues week 1 and Top Esports week 1 was pretty much the difference in this group.
Yeah. And even I even want to say the win against Gam wasn't even particularly all that great. I
Oh,
remember
Rogues won
thinking
at the first match of
yeah,
week 2? Oh, yeah, yeah.
yeah. I remember thinking like if it's not for Gigabyte Marines rushing to well, they got a kill or a couple of kills or something, and then they go to get tier 1 mid and then go to drag after, like they greeted for 2 objectives rather than just taking the one. And full credit to Rogue for, punishing the mistake, right? That's what you're supposed to do in League. But like, I couldn't ignore that. Like, that's super greedy for a team to do, especially at Worlds. And then Larson gets the 2 man Azir shuffle and gets Rogue right back in the game. Whereas, like, they're losing that game. So, kind of performance out of Rogue a little bit Monka, and you kind of worry about them moving forward, even though they're moving on in the tournament.
Yeah, Malrang is just that guy. He just builds a bunch of random items in the jungle. I don't understand.
He's
Like,
Power of Evil jungle style.
yeah, I don't know. I don't understand this fascination with this Bomby Cinder into Chempunk Chainsword Rush. I mean, I guess it's gotta be half decent, like in terms of the base stats you get from the item. Obviously, there's like a whole lot of discussion around heal cutting and everything, but I think that Chempunk Chainsword is actually like pretty decent item in comparison to like Oblivion Orb or whatever. But at the same time, like I don't think you should be building Bomby Cinder Chempunk Chainsword on champs like Lee Sin and Jarvan. Like that is just not okay.
I don't ever well, I'm not don't ever. I don't pay attention to item builds as much. When I think of Malrang is I love the way he plays. He plays full aggressive and he's ganking heavy and I love that kind of style. It's very feast or famine and I think it makes a lot of stuff happen. So even if they didn't have the greatest look as a team, I still think Rogue is a very fun team to watch, which might just be some copium side for the European fans, but that's kind of how I feel when I watch them.
Yeah, I mean they definitely
Also,
had their struggles in week 2, but I think at the same time you compare them to the rest of the Western teams, and they were by far the best.
yeah, fair.
So
Fair, right? Because there wasn't like you mentioned, even though the East just completely dumped on the West, um, you still have to give some shade towards the Western teams that just looked bad. And I don't think the Rogue. I don't think you can throw them in the same group as those other teams as you mentioned. I think that's totally fair. Guy I want to shout out is Mark for playing the Blitzcrank. I know they're not moving on. That Blitzcrank game was fucking awesome though. Completely dumped on Rogue for that one, but that game was really fun to watch, and so I got to give him props. I want to see more Blitz at the tournament.
Yeah, and then lastly, we obviously had DRX topping the group. They look maybe not like as much of a powerhouse as the rest of the Eastern teams, specifically the top ones, and JDG and Gen G and T1 potentially. But I don't know. They just feel like they're the underdog of like they're going to be the underdog of the knockout stage, and I think that the players who didn't get a lot of praise or notoriety throughout the majority of the LCS split are actually some of the players who are playing the best on this team. And I think the main two to point to are King and Zeka. Like
Yeah,
Zeka is smurfing the whole
he's having a
fucking
good
like
tournament. Yeah,
he's playing just as well as the rest of the mid laners in the tournament. And
yeah, his Silas was really really good.
I don't think that you could say that about, any other I don't think you could say that about a lot of these not as popular Korean mids at previous world championships or even normal LCK mid laners. Like there's always a huge gap between, Chovy, Faker, Showmaker, and then the rest. Or BDD if you want to throw him in there in previous years. But
Yeah,
Zeka is right up there with them, and he's playing really, really well.
rip BDD.
Yeah, that
Guy has
guy's
long COVID.
yep.
That's my excuse for BDD. Last thing I want to touch on. What did you think of the Heimer Ash bot lane?
Yeah, I mean, I've
That was
obviously
awesome.
Cloud9 did debut at first, and their match against
Little different result.
yeah, who were they playing in that one? I think it was T1. But after that, in a Max Waldo interview, he basically alluded to the fact that Heimerdinger support is actually a pick that has been somewhat popular in scrims. And I think I was watching some of the co-stream VODs for a couple of these games, and Doubleth was talking about how Ash Heimerdinger is actually a pretty good lane. And we saw it 2 times, right? The
I don't
Ash
know if
Heimerdinger.
who was I talking with because I don't know if it was you, if it was Tommy, Scott, or Andrew. I was talking with one of you guys saying that I didn't think that Cloud9 was just trolling by picking the Heimer. To me, I actually thought that it was a strat that they felt was good. That wasn't you?
I don't think so.
Okay. well, Anyways, I'm glad that we saw another team play it and also play it with success because now we know, like, oh yeah, this wasn't just some troll shit because Cloud9 was out of the tournament. This was like, here's how you do it, and that was really fun to watch.
Yeah.
I guess final thing now, one more thing actually to say was I saw Trimby, was it Trimby or Comp? One of them were tweeting out how like they were getting shit for picking the Nasus,
Oh,
but
yeah.
like
Trimby
when they
was
first
getting
yeah,
his
when they
asshole
first
opened.
well, when they first came out with like the Soraka, like people were praising him for picking something new, but like this one didn't work out, and so everyone was dumping on him because of that. And I totally feel like that sentiment. Like it's kind of similar to the Fudge stuff, right? Like if Fudge was winning in some of those counter matchups, everyone's praising him because he's got the balls to play something different, you know. Um, and I felt really bad for him because I think that some of the different picks that Rogue's bot lane has been playing for a couple of months now is part of the reason why they're so good is because they take the time to master these different matchups. And guess what? Sometimes they don't pan out. And it sucks to see when they don't pan out and the community is got to shit all over them for trying something different because I think that's what stops players from trying different things in the future. Let them try different stuff. It's okay if they fail.
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately for Trimby, it's like a little bit of guilty by association because the LS haters also came out of the woodworks because LS has been talking about NASA support for like a year now,
Mm.
and I just think that they got the fucking hate boner and just started
Anyways,
going.
Anyways, to sum up this group, I definitely do still think this is the weakest group. Um, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the two teams that are moving on are bad, but I would say they are underdogs for what's left in the tournament because there are so many good teams left.
Yeah, we talked about Group Group B being 2 number 1 seeds. Group C kind of feels like 2 number 2 seeds.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Group D now?
Yep, Group D. This group it kind of just naturally felt like the least entertaining and least interesting group because it did feel like from the jump a pretty clear cut. Okay, these two teams are making it out, and okay, these other two teams have absolutely no chance. And I think
But couldn't you say the same thing about Group A? I guess Fnatic
no,
had a good
I don't
start,
think
so
so.
maybe not. Yeah, Fnatic had a good start in week 1, so
But
maybe
Cloud9 and Fnatic are two teams that have a history of success at the World Championship.
Oh, you're saying coming into the tournament, you're not saying going into week
No,
2.
I'm saying coming into the tournament.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah, but
Sorry, carry on.
I mean, I guess to continue on that, especially after week one, it was clear that Gen G and RNG were getting out of this group.
Yeah.
I think the main question was if Gen G could look a lot better because while they did go 2-1, it didn't feel like they were looking like, world beaters and a tournament
Yep,
favorite. But they
agreed.
definitely had a much better week two, going 4-0, winning the tiebreaker against RNG, pretty much fighting through all of what RNG had to throw at them because RNG did throw a lot of different picks at them. They also whipped out the Blitzcrank support in their first game. It was the one before the tiebreaker one, I
Yeah.
believe.
Mhm.
And Gen G, they passed the test with flying colors.
Yeah. I thought that this group was still really fun because I think Gen G, well, I don't know. I guess I'm just really interested in Gen G and RNG altogether. Of course, I'm interested in 100 Thieves, but like I liked seeing these two teams battle it out. I'm glad we got a tiebreaker for it as well. So like, yeah, I don't know. I still really enjoyed the group, and I guess the copium side of things was that I thought 100 Thieves looked so much better than they did in week 1, and of course that still was not good enough for them to catch up to the East. But regardless, like I thought the biggest difference to me was Huhi. I thought he looked really really bad in week 1. We saw him engaging on the Amumu in fights that they just don't win, and you're like, wait, do they not know the matchups? And then obviously in week 2, he absolutely shit on the Flying Oysters with that very same pick. He was landing almost all of his bandages. One little hiccup in team fight in the middle of the game, but for the most part was flawless and just completely took over the game. So big props to Huhi for his improvement from week 1 to week 2.
Yeah, Mumu's been one of who he's kind of like pocket picks.
Yeah, he likes
He,
to engage, right?
he's good on like those random niche engagers like setting a Mumu.
Dude, the Seraphine game too was so sad because I actually thought that was RNG, right?
Yes.
It was RNG, and I remember why. I know why it was RNG now because I actually thought that they had that game in the bag, but RNG did such a good job in not the last team fight. Well, maybe that one as well, but the second last team fight around Baron, they did such a good job of piling on their damage all onto the Senna, and like it was all within like 1 second. Senna just went down so fast, and it was because RNG was just on the same page as to who to focus and when to focus and to time that so perfectly, right?
Talking
Because
about that Rift
it's
Herald fight.
oh, maybe it was Rift Herald. I thought it was Baron, but maybe it was Rift Herald.
Oh, no.
Regard,
I,
I, regardless, there was one fight where they pile on all the damage, and it's really difficult to get through all the shields and healing of Senna and Seraphine, but RNG managed to do it, and I don't know. I was really impressed with them able to one shot the Senna, and I think that's what swung the game in
it
their
might have
favor.
been Baron. I don't remember exactly. It was close to like
I
20
think it was
minutes.
Baron. I just remember the Senna flashing over the Baron pit wall, kinda, sorta. And the Sivir boomerang hit both sides, and the Vild came in, and just the Fiora also. I think he procced a Vital, and this was all within the span of like 1 or 2 seconds. Like it was just so fast, and it was like shit. If they don't hard nuke this Senna, I feel like there's enough healing and shielding in this comp to sustain the fight a lot better for 100 Thieves, which is something we saw them have a lot of success with in Summer Split. Like the Senna or the Seraphine comp was one that they ran many times. I would say I liked it a little bit more with Wukong when they ran it back a month or two ago, whenever that was. But I understand why they go Jarvan because you can lock in the Sivir, right? Sivir doesn't have an escape from the thing. She could spell shield, sure, but she's stuck in the Cataclysm if she doesn't have Flash. So I get why they took the Jarvan. I just think 100 Thieves did it a little bit better with the Wukong. But I mean, I'm being a little picky here, I think.
Yeah. God, rando and second item Jarvan makes me depressed. I see people on Pro Play do it all the time. Gordringer into Randuins. I just get so sad.
You know, you mentioned how Gen G looked so much better in week 2. I think the guy to point out was, well, maybe a lot of the players, but the first one that comes to mind is Ruler. Ruler did not have the greatest week one. And then he was absolutely shitting on people with whether it be Aphelios or Lucian in week two. So that was what was scary for me was you saw Gen G really come online in week two. And so even though they didn't have the greatest start to week one, everyone, us included, said like, let's not count out Gen G just yet. And we kind of saw why, right?
Yeah, Genji, pretty good.
Yeah. The Aphelios, I think it was the tiebreaker Aphelios game. Uh, Absolutely stomping on people. So
Hmm.
big props there. And then the Oysters, I guess we could talk about them a little bit. I just thought they were shit. I thought they were really, really bad. And watching them in week two made me more sad that we lost to them in week one. I was like, oh man, we lost to these guys last week. This fucking sucks. The support, was it Koala? Is that the support? That guy stinks.
Yeah, I realized like halfway through I was like, "Oh my god, these are like all the old Hong Kong Attitude players." I remember like we were talking
Oh,
about
was
this
it?
team and I was like, "I don't even know a single fucking person on this team," but I'm pretty sure like 3 out of their 5 players were at Worlds on season 9 in that C9
I
group.
don't remember.
It
I don't remember that at
was
all.
when C9 was in a group with G2, Griffin and Hong Kong Attitude.
Yeah. Anyways, that's pretty much it for me on Group D. I think this could be another one where you have 2 1 seeds making it out. And I know RNG is technically the 4th seed. I'm not sleeping on them. They're good.
Yep.
Uh, okay. Before we move on, I want to stay with some of this stuff a little bit. I mentioned earlier the most disappointing team for me was G2. Do you have your team that was most disappointing?
I mean, I guess it's probably got to be top esports.
Yeah.
People viewed this team just as, if not better than JDG potentially in terms of their strength going into the tournament.
It
And
does feel like the LPL always has one that flops, eh?
yeah, Tian continues to choke
Oh,
at Worlds ever since
poor guy.
ever since they won in season 9, basically. I know I Will Dominate is like the biggest Tion simp I've ever seen in my life. That guy is licking his balls
He's a
24/7 on.
fan,
No,
man. He's a fan.
dude, there's a fan and then there's being a simp. So I mean,
You
there's
think he
big.
goes too far?
Yes, he literally licks his balls. But
I don't watch any of I Will Dominate's content,
I
so
don't watch it.
I don't
I
know.
just read his Twitter and he's like
Oh, I see.
he just the thing that I don't get about Dom is he just argues with randoms on Twitter. And I mean, people do that. That's cool, whatever. But he's like arguing with randoms on Twitter all the time and he's like, "Tian so good, Tian number 1. Like how could you not rank Tian number 1?" And like this guy just continues to choke on the world stage. He did it last year, he did it this year. I don't remember if he even at Worlds in season 10 because I think he was still on FPX and they didn't make Worlds. I don't remember exactly, but the last 2 years he's been at Worlds, he's just, become a massive choke artist. And I mean, I do hope that, he's obviously a good player and hopefully he can fix some of these issues. But, there's been a lot of stories and sentiments that we've heard from a lot of these Eastern teams where they talk about players who just have massive, massive stage fright and have so many issues controlling their nerves when they're performing on stage. And I guess, I don't know if that's been explicitly said about Tian, but that's got to be like something that's obviously apparent.
Yeah, but last year though, we got to remember. I mean, I'm always the one to point this out, right? Yeah, he had wrist issues last year, right? And that's something that I always will. I'm never going to forget about that. It's something that really, really affects your ability, not just to play the games, but to practice more. And this is like Worlds time. That's grind time. It's time to get your games in to really get a good meta read and not being able to practice that much. Again, this is last year. I'm not saying that that carried over this year. We have no reason to believe that. But last year, I give him the pass because I definitely think wrist issues were a big part as to why he didn't perform. Like he looked like ridiculously not like himself last year. So to me, I think it's I don't want to pile on what happened this year with last year. I think they're a bit separate.
That's fair.
You know. Okay, quarterfinal predictions now.
Oh yeah, hold on. I have the knockout stage bracket up here. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, these series are in order from when they're being played. So the first one is Thursday. I think they're 5. They're now back to being 5 p.m. EST. First one is JDG versus Rogue. I'm trying to figure out a way to say that this won't be a 3-0 stomp, but I can't. I think it's going to be a 3-0 stomp.
3-0 for me as well.
For
Um,
Rogue, obviously, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm taking JDG 3-0. The thing is like I don't want to just completely forget the week 1 that Rogue had, right? I don't want to do that. But I can't ignore the week 2 they had. And so I will admit that there is a world where Rogue shows up and makes the series way more interesting, maybe even wins it. Who knows? But I think when you have JDG that started to look a lot better. I know they could have lost some games in week 1 that they ended up winning, and I will even be the first one to admit that JDG did not look as clean as I would have liked them to throughout the whole tournament so far. I still think that there is a significant gap between these two teams, and like we mentioned earlier, between the regions, right? So I'm gonna go JDG 3-0 as well.
Yeah. Next up, we got the, I don't know, this is like a bit of an El Clasico at this point, T1 versus RNG. They've had a ton of prominent Worlds Best of Series. I'm trying to think of all the ones they've ever played before. World Finals Season 3, Quarterfinals Season 7, Semifinals Season, I don't know, is it really only 2 series? No way.
Are you remembering all the times that they played each other?
Well, either way, they played in the finals in season 3, which was hype, and then that 3-2 comeback from T1 in season 7 was also pretty hype. But either
Yeah.
way, I'm expecting a really good series out of both of these teams. I think T1 is maybe a little bit underrated going into the knockout stage, because I think the majority of people would peg the favorites of the knockout stage, quote unquote, would be Gen G, uh, and JDG, and I feel like
Hmm.
T1 is kind of right there behind them. I think that T1 obviously maybe had some, how do I even say it? It's difficult to get a big grasp on them because their games were such stomps. Like literally every single game that they won was a stomp. It just wasn't close. They destroyed EDG both games. They destroyed Cloud9 both games. They had one pretty close game against Fnatic, and then in the second game against Fnatic, they destroyed them. So I've always
Yeah.
find it difficult to take a lot away from, specifically games where one team just gets completely annihilated, and it happened in all 5 of their wins. So I don't really know what to expect going into it. It'll obviously be a much tougher test, RNG being than the rest of the Group A teams. So I'm expecting a really close series. I'm going to favor T1, though. I'm going to pick them 3-2.
Let me check my pick'ems here. I think I went with RNG, um, more so because I'm a
Oh, I
Xiaohu
haven't even
fan.
done my pick'ems, actually.
Yeah, do your pick'ems, guys. Don't forget to do your pick'ems. Yeah, I did go with RNG. Only 10% of people took RNG. I think mostly just because I like Xiaohu. I think this series should go 5. I say should go 5. That I don't actually I shouldn't say that because I don't think any series ever should go 5, right? I think it's just what happens sometimes when you have really close matchups, but sometimes you have really close matchups that go 3-0. But I am expecting this one to go 5. I'm going RNG 3-2. Um, I do wonder if Gala is going to be able to get like the Sivir again. Like that was something that I thought he looked really good on, and I think people are starting to realize that Sivir Yumi is definitely still OP.
I mean,
I
Yumi
don't know if that's
should
going to
be
be
permabanned.
Yumi's getting through sometimes though, and they got that. Maybe it's just 100 Thieves that let it through. I don't know. Um, but
Well,
I think
and
that if
T1 got it a couple times.
yeah, so I guess honestly, if both teams are clearly showing that they had success on it, maybe it just gets banned out altogether. I don't know. But yeah, anyways, both of these teams are looking really good. Um, I do agree with you what you say about like it's hard to judge T1 when like they're hard stomping their games. It doesn't feel like there's a lot to go off of. But anyway,
Yeah.
yeah,
Next
3-2
up,
RNG.
we have Genji
Did you give your
versus,
score line? Did I miss it?
I said 3-2 T1.
Okay, my bad.
Next up we have Genji versus Damwon. So one LCK team will be dropping for sure right here. Some region cannibalism, as they
This
like to call
sucks.
it. But I don't know. This one, I'm going Genji 3-1 on this one, and a
Hmm.
lot of it has to do with the non-mid jungle matchup, pretty much, because I would kind of peg the duos of Peanut and Chovy and Showmaker and Canyon relatively similar. However, when it comes to the rest of the map, specifically in the bot lane, Ruler and the Hens definitely have a big step up on Kellen and Duck Dom. And I think top lane is, kind of. I think Nuguri does have that X factor, but at the same time, I said it before, he also has the int factor. I think
Yeah.
Doran is just he's the kind of if I want to pick an NA comparison for people to understand better, he kind of feels like an impact type player.
Yeah.
And I think that Genji just has more ways to win the game than Damwon does. And that's kind of part of the reason why I have it as a 3-1. I do expect this to be a very slow LCK type series where we just see a lot of scaling. And it's going to come down to macro objective control and those, snap decision mechanical moments. And I think that Genji is going to win out on the majority of those.
Yeah, so I said that it sucks that these two teams have to play each other, and I do stand by that. But let's be honest, it is really exciting, and I think the most exciting thing is the jungle mid duos, right? Because they're so good. And so like I guess if it wasn't going to happen in quarters, there's a good chance that you ended up seeing this in semis or something like that, right? So I guess the fact that we're getting this matchup is kind of a blessing in a way, even if it's earlier than we would like it to be. I did go with my heart instead of brain on this one as well. So I did go with Damwon. Now, look, I like Gen G. I really do. I just really like Showmaker and Canyon. So I went with my heart on this one, and I'm going 3-2 for Damwon. If I was try-harding my pickums, I probably would go Gen G for mostly the same reasons that you put out. When you do the matchups lane by lane, I think Gen G has the advantage, but I don't know. We pray that Showmaker and Canyon uh, can hard stomp Peanut and Chovy. So yeah.
Already. And then last up, we have DRX versus EDG. And similar to T1, EDG is another team that I think is difficult to read going into the quarterfinals because exactly like T1, every match that they won was a complete stomp. They shit stomped Cloud9 two times, they shit stomped Fnatic two times, and then they got shit on by T1 two times. And it's just hard to draw a lot from those wins and losses when there's not much to go off of. And I think at the same time, DRX being kind of an underrated team might actually swing it more, might swing it more into the favor of EDG because people don't seem to be really putting a lot of attention on DRX. But I think this is the one time that I am actually going to go with the upset. I'm going to pick DRX. I guess
Okay.
I say pick the upset. I presume it's an upset. I'm not sure.
I still think it's an upset because look, I know RNG is a fourth seed as well, and they look pretty good. But it is still a fourth seed, right? So there's that. And we did mention that their group wasn't exactly the toughest group ever. So while they still looked really, really good, the group that they played in, a lot of the teams didn't show up, right? Or at least didn't show up for the full 2 weeks. And so you don't know how much stock of like positivity to put into DRX, right? So I think that's why they're still considered the underdog, especially EDG. We can't just forget about what happened last year, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna go with 3-2. I guess. I mean, it's hard. This feels like the hardest series to predict for me, just because of what we don't really know about EDG, and then also if DRX is gonna continue to look like they did in the group stage, which I think a lot of people would say it was overachieving, especially from some of the players that we didn't expect to perform as well as they are, like Kingen and Zeka. If they continue those performances, I think they got a great shot of winning the series. But if they maybe come down to earth a little bit and kind of the pressure goes back to resting on solely Deft and maybe Pioshik, it definitely will be more difficult.
Yeah, I'm gonna go EDG on this one. I'm gonna give them the 3-1.
Damn,
Um,
we got three different ones.
do we?
Yeah,
I mean, a couple of them were mostly again not brain predicting with heart, which is, to be honest, is just kind of fucking my pickums. But I don't care. I don't give a shit. Yeah. Okay. What do we got next, JNT 250?
I don't know. What do we have next?
Oh, I guess I wanted to ask you, has your pick for the tournament changed?
Oh no, I had it as Gen G. I think yeah, it's probably still Gen G for me. Part of it will be also because I think they have a pretty good bracket. Like they don't have to face JDG, T1, or RNG until the finals. So to me, it definitely feels like an easier road to the finals than the upper part of the bracket there. But also, I guess in terms of, I guess, sorry, my prediction hasn't changed, but at the same time, I definitely feel more confident in the LCK going into the knockout stage.
Interesting.
I think they just overall looked better in the group stage. And I don't know, I just have more confidence in the LCK. If Genji doesn't win it, I definitely think that Damwon or T1 has a good chance to win it as well.
Yeah, my brain pick, which for the record, brain pick is the actual prediction, by the way. Heart pick is just Pick'em's law. Brain pick is still Genji, right? I think especially with seeing how Ruler played in week two, that's when you kind of feel like Genji is back into their own when he's just hard styling. And then heart pick, Damwon. Let's go Damwon. They're pretty much. I think Damwon was my backup pick if NA didn't do well from the beginning. I guess them or RNG, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Worlds altogether. Where do we start with this, man? The discussion about Worlds viewership,
Yeah, I mean,
perhaps?
I think it was what yesterday. There was an article that reached the front page of or the top post on the League subreddit from esports charts, basically outlining the fact that the world's viewership is down 40%. And while that might be a scary number to initially just hear and see, at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, they did mention in this article that a lot of it does have to do with the poor time zones for the European and Eastern viewership, which makes
Right.
a lot of sense.
Yeah.
However, I fear that this will take away from North America being a world's destination in the future.
Absolutely.
And I think part of that also might have to do with the NA teams not performing very well and their performances or lack thereof appearance has affected the LCS teams in terms of their budget and operations because obviously Team Liquid not making worlds that was a big factor in them presumably cutting back on their budget and not doing the whole super team route moving forward. And worlds being in North America pushed a lot of these teams to make a worlds push,
Could
signing
spend.
players, go all out.
Yeah.
And I think with the world's viewership being down and teams else I should say LCS teams being directly impacted by their performances at Worlds or not making Worlds is actually a negative thing. Plus the viewership being bad, I just think, and Jesus, LCS potentially moving to weekdays, and I mean, to be honest, if we go down that rabbit hole of reducing teams, I just think that is just take it to minor region, and then Worlds is not going to be in North America anymore because they're never going to hold Worlds in Vietnam or wherever the PCS is or like they're only going to hold it in major regions, and I just I worry that NA is going to get phased out here.
Yeah. I'm not going to repeat everything you said because agree with almost all of it. I guess the only thing that I want to hammer home is this our last Worlds? Did we just get our last Worlds?
At least we got to go.
Because it certainly yeah, it certainly would suggest, right? Everyone obviously, viewership is gonna be down because of the time zones like you mentioned, but 40% is a lot. And then you mentioned how LCS isn't looking that good. You were worried about the region altogether. Like, is there even gonna be enough fans for them to want to come back? So I worry that this is our last Worlds. We mentioned how we got to go, and that's cool. So should we perhaps talk about our experiences there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I it's for some I don't know. I've seen a lot of good and bad about people's experience at the World venue and being there for the day. I've seen a ton of people really like the venue because it was like condensed and it really had like it was loud. It was a lot of fun. I've seen a lot
Yep.
of sentiments of people saying, "Oh, the venue was too small. There wasn't enough to do." Part of that I definitely agree with. There pretty much wasn't anything to do apart from watching the games. I mean, a lot of in between the games for the people who are attending, it was a lot of going to the bathroom and getting some more food or getting another drink or just wanting to get up and not sit down and talk with your friends or go to the little crane machines to win some prizes. But at the same time, I mean, it didn't feel like all the space was utilized. I felt that more could have been done.
Yeah, I agree. That's the biggest thing for me is like I was telling because my dad was like, "How was it? Like, what did you do and whatever?" And he's asking questions, and I'm going like, "Dad, you'd be surprised, but like the teams playing that day, I didn't even see if their jerseys were for sale anywhere. Like, were they?"
No, they definitely weren't.
How are you not selling merchandise for the teams that are playing that day? You would presume that if Cloud9, for example, is playing, you'd be able to go buy a Cloud9 jersey. Or, my God, the fucking RNG fans or EDG fans are there. You're telling me these people aren't going to want to buy some merch?
Well,
Yes, they will.
and even for North American teams who like and support Eastern teams who don't necessarily have the opportunity to buy some of their merch, it's just
Yeah.
like easy access. Like, dude, I would have bought a Faker jersey. Are you fucking kidding me? Like,
That and I guess that's where maybe you come to the conclusion that maybe the venue wasn't the greatest. Now, I loved the venue for the viewing experience. I thought it was great, right? You mentioned crowd, super loud. The everything was visible no matter where you were sitting. We sat in 3 different spots. I could see everything the whole time. No complaints there. But outside, it didn't feel like they utilized all that area, right? There was like those really long hallways where it's like maybe they could put up a booth here for the teams that are playing that day. I get you couldn't fit all, what would it be? I guess 16 teams, they can't all
yeah,
have a booth on the same day, but you could have the day that those teams are playing. I feel like that's just a missed opportunity. And
or
you
at
mentioned
the
how they had like those crane things. It was like that was kind of it.
yeah, or just at the very least, like if you're the North American teams competing at the World Championship, like I feel like they should be pushing for booths there. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be like all the teams there. Like it can just be the NA teams. I don't know. It just to me, and maybe this I'm just not educated at all in terms of how you know merchandise sales works at an event, but it just seems like free money to me. I don't know.
Yeah, it
Put up
does.
100 Thieves, a C9, and an EG booth with their jerseys. Like, dude, 100 Thieves could sell some merch from there, dude. They'd fucking make a cool, like, I don't even know how much money they would sell, but a cool like 50K or something.
Yeah. Anyways, we talked about the last couple of weeks how like we were still expecting some scuffed stuff, but we weren't going to let that ruin the experience, right? Like the experience of going to Worlds is one that's really valuable and might even seem more valuable now if this is the last Worlds in North America. Don't know that for sure yet, but very well could be. And I would still say that we probably both came away from that tournament going, that was hella fun, and I would go again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
100%. Yeah. So even though like we have some question mark pings for Rito games, I think it was still a really good tournament, and clearly people at the venue enjoyed the show. It was good. It was hype, and shout out to those guys that painted fucking oysters on their chests at the last day or whatever. That was hilarious.
I guess the last thing to quickly talk about, it has a little bit to do with, going to the event in person, but with the all the COVID issues that have been popping up during the tournament,
Hmm.
especially during week 2, some teams weren't on stage at all and other teams were missing players. Pretty much all of RNG has COVID and apparently they all have it pretty badly.
There were
Um,
0 players on stage for, was it Oysters RNG?
yeah, I think you said that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
0
and
players on stage, which I
EDG was
actually
missing Scout, and Damwon was missing a player, I think, or a couple
I actually
players.
don't think that that bothered me as much as I thought it would. It definitely was noticeable, and it was definitely like, "Man, I wish the players were on stage right now." But I don't think it bothered me as much as I thought it would,
But
even
I
though it
think,
was noticeable.
at the same time, like imagine if all of Cloud9, EG, and 100 Thieves had COVID and weren't on stage, because it definitely
True.
was exciting when they would do their when they're getting their setups ready. They walk out, everybody cheers after they finish their game. They cheer, or in the case of they got eliminated from the group and they took their bow on stage, like people cheered, and it was cool to see the players and see them in person. But
That's a good point.
when they're behind the curtain, playing on a isolated setup, and definitely doesn't feel as enticing and enthralling.
Totally fair. I think you make a good point there. That's fair. But yeah, overall success. Would go again. And if you still have the opportunity to go for quarters, do it. I know Jinter's going. Um, Semis, finals, go guys, go if you can. I think you'll enjoy it regardless of a little bit of scuffed stuff. Quick news.
Yep. We got some quick news here. First up, one that came out quite a while ago now to this point. There was a competitive ruling with regards to G2 Carlos. Just realized I don't have it pulled up. Do you have it pulled up?
I do not.
Okay, I'll get it one sec. I'll just read the
I
T
did.
I'll read the TLDR quickly. I have it right here.
Okay.
It says here that TLDR, Carlos Rodriguez engaged in activity detrimental to the best interest of the league and Riot Games in violation of LEC rules. Consequently, he's suspended from holding any managerial or operational position within a team or organization in a Riot sanctioned competition or participation therein until November 13th, 2022. In addition, Carlos Rodriguez is required to complete sensitivity training and executive training as detailed below. The training must be provided by an independent third party that is unaffiliated with G2, Esports, the league, or Carlos. So pretty much in terms of that last point with the sensitivity training and executive training, it's the same thing that Reggie had to do. And also that he's not allowed to be affiliated with any Riot sanctioned teams for the next month.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of people question marking, like, wasn't he removed from his position at G2? I think this is mostly about setting a precedent, right? That, like, regardless of him being on the team anymore, or not being the CEO anymore, that, like, there still needs to be repercussions if you break one of the rules. Now, I know a lot of people don't agree with the punishment in the first place, but technically, by that rule set that you pointed out there, that is technically breaking a rule. And so there has to be a
Yeah.
punishment, I
And that
guess.
was just the TLDR. Obviously, the whatever
Yeah.
rules he broke and the specifics of it are listed in that article.
There's an article that you could find just by Googling it. Shouldn't be hard to find it if you're interested in more. What else, J&T?
Next up, the former LCK, EU, and NA god himself, Ryu, is joining Live Sandbox as their new head coach. Good for him. I mean,
Yeah.
he's kind of been like a staple in league for the last 6, 7, 8 years. So
Yeah, that's cool. Nothing for me to add. I think it's cool.
I guess even longer than that because the Faker clip, but
Oh, rip.
10 years
Okay.
almost.
Some people never forget.
Yeah. And we alluded to this at the beginning, but we're getting that NA and EU off-season rumors. It's time. You know,
Dude, I'm gonna open up Twitter and Reddit right now as we're going through these because I just feel like, as you know, as soon as we publish it, whatever. As soon as this video goes live, there's gonna be another rumor out there.
that's actually a good idea.
I'm going through it. Go through what we got right now. I'm looking.
Yeah. I will start off the first thing. Peter Dunn is parting ways with EG. He's no longer going to be their head coach. I know this isn't on we have listed, but I believe also their I don't know if it's their assistant coach or head analyst or something, but Rigby is his name. EG
Yeah.
Rigby. He's
Yep.
also not going to be on the team next year. I think part of that is also because he has to do his like mandatory South Korean military service.
Hmm.
But it basically what I mean, or what the reason I'm saying this is that EG's getting an entirely new coaching staff, head coach
Yeah.
and assistant coaches included.
Yeah. Yep.
Next
Yep. Yep.
up, Jan, TL's Academy AD, is extending his contract with TL through 2024. And why I think this is very, very interesting is he got a contract extension, and I don't think Ayla got a contract extension, or I don't know if Ayla already got one a little
I'm
while
looking at it.
ago.
I'm opening. I'm on it. I'm on it. J&T. You'll
But
see. I'm opening up the database right now.
I think that this can, you know, we can extrapolate to the future a little bit, and I think this could give us a good idea of where Team Liquid could potentially be going with their roster going into 2023. Obviously, we'll potentially include Yon, or at the very least, maybe some 6-man roster or tryout consideration. And TL is
They could
obviously
be
going
in
to
the
have a
works with Ayla, right?
maybe
I'm looking
they
right
could
now.
be.
Ayla's only signed until November 22nd of this year, so
Okay.
they could be in the works with something with him right now, and it just hasn't been announced yet. But the Jan thing says a lot, right?
Yeah. And then last up, this is a rumor. Sorry, I guess I should have said that. I should have prefaced this by saying some of this are official, some of it is a rumor. The Peter Dunn and the EG coaching staff, that's official. That was on EG's Twitter, as well as Peter Dunn put out a statement. And the Jan thing is official as well. However, this is a rumor that Chime looks like he's going to be sticking with TSM for 2023.
I was worried that he wouldn't get that because we all thought, well, I think we can all recognize that TSM needs to bounce back somehow. And so I was a little bit afraid that they were just going to go for another import because, I mean, we've seen that happen many, many times. Maybe TSM is learning, look, the import thing. Oh, I mean, a lot of the LCS teams are learning the import thing isn't exactly the way to go. So maybe that's why. And I think that he showed a lot of promise in the small amount of time that we did see him. hoping to see him improve. And if TSM is going to look better, I would love to see it be because of Chime. He just seems like a good player to root for and a nice guy.
Yep. And then we'll move to some European stuff. Did you find any other NA related?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, we'll move on to some of the EU stuff. And this is where the big boy stuff comes out. And I'll preface it by saying this is a rumor. However, the rumor is that Flackid and Yankos from G2 are going to be allowed to explore their options for 2023. And we always say what explore options means, but that means you're fucking gone.
Yeah. That's big news, right? That is really big news. And end of an era kind of stuff, as people are pointing out.
Well, especially with Yankos.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess that's where I was leaning to, more for the end of an era kind of thing.
I see.
Um, there was discussions like before, like I'm talking like a few months ago, so before any of this, like before him leaving G2, that like he would possibly retire. And I'm not saying he was saying that, but people were theorizing that. And then I even remember, and maybe it was a Travis Gafford interview. Someone was interviewing him, asking him if he would consider going to NA. And the only notable thing about that interview was that his answer had changed from years past, right? Because 2 or 3 years ago, if you asked the Yankos, would you ever go to NA? He would laugh and be like, no way, no shot. And I think maybe even the same thing with Perks. And then it ended up happening with Perks. But then I think this time around, his answer was something like, I don't think so, but you never know. And so I don't know. It's interesting to think of because, I mean, how many times have we seen European players that are, especially star players, once their time is done with the team that they're on, they end up coming across the pond.
Yeah, I feel
Makes
like
you wonder.
yeah, I know Yankos gets a lot of views on his Twitch streams. He gets like close to 10K views. So I feel like
Oh yeah.
he's got the streaming route locked down. If he
Oh yeah.
doesn't potentially get an offer from a top team either in NA or EU, I think obviously he probably wants to stay in EU, but we'll have to see how the sort of free agent, market breaks down in that region, but presumably Fnatic new jungler. It sounds like G2 new jungler. We don't know what Rogue's going to want to do. Then you got teams like, Excel, and I think the only team that people probably know is going to be having a jungler next year is Vitality with Bo, because they basically said that that's been their plan for the last year, was to play Bo in 2023. So to me, that seems like the only one that's a lock.
Yeah, and from what people have been tweeting, I think Cadril even tweeted out like this offseason is going to be crazy. So there are more rumors to come, right? There's a lot left still, and it sounds like the thing is we've had some pretty crazy off seasons anyways the last couple of years, but it seems like this one should be no different. So waiting to see what else we got coming.
And then another rumor similar to his name, Irrelevant, is joining SK for 2023. I don't even know who their top laner is. Is it Genax? Is their top
Yeah,
laner? Or
yeah,
I thought he
Gen
was
X.
decent.
Yeah, he was okay. I don't know. I guess they think that irrelevant is there's still a lot there. The other rumor that was added on to the irrelevant thing is that SK spending is supposed to go way up. So maybe they think that he will look good with a particular star player that they're looking to sign. I don't know. But it sounds like SK is supposed to be spending for the first time in I don't know, long time ever maybe.
Since
I don't know.
season 4 when they made
Yeah.
Worlds.
Yeah. What would that have been with Sven Skaren?
Yep. Svenskeren, Forgiven.
Wow.
Was N
Throwback.
rated on that team? No
Yep.
shot.
Yeah, he was.
Who else was on
Yeah.
that team? I don't remember who's what we need their mid and
Uh, he coached,
top.
didn't he? Uh,
Freddy? Is that not him?
no. Oh, he was maybe on that team actually, but there was another the mid laner. I just lost in my head. I had who it was, and now I forget.
Looking it up.
Don't say it. I know this guy. Come on, man.
Yeah, I won't say anything.
He coached for. I'm upset with myself. I can picture his face. He played recently. He was a coach that got subbed in for like a little bit. No, I don't know if
Uh,
he was the mid laner at that time. Okay, who is it?
Hold
It
on.
might be somebody else.
It was. Oh my god.
Is it the coach, right? The guy who ended up coaching and ended up subbing in not too long
Yeah,
ago?
Jesus. You're thinking of?
Yes, yes.
Oh
And that's
wait,
who it was?
Forgiven wasn't on the team yet, actually. But their roster was Freddy, Svenskeren, Jesus, Candy Panda, and N rated.
Can you believe that I remember that?
Yeah, I'm
I
actually
think that's good for
surprised.
me. Yeah.
Dude, I forgot about that Candy Panda guy. For him
And then Jess is like I was saying, he subbed in recently just for like a
for
game or
1 week or
something.
something, I think. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Couldn't remember the name, but I knew the guy, so I'm proud of myself. Is that it for the roster rumors for now?
yeah. We got one more thing
For
on quick
now.
news, and the new champion, Kasante, comes out next patch, which is in 2 weeks basically, because the new patch just dropped today. Today being Wednesday. It actually looks really cool. I was watching Lorlo play it on PBE a
Mm.
bunch last night. The champ actually looks really, really cool. It's kind of like some tank Yasuo thing. It looks really cool
Ah.
because he's got
Those
like the
weapon things look cool. I don't know. I looked up the name of them yesterday. I already forget. They're like N photo or
yeah.
I don't know. They're cool though.
He's got a 3 proc like Q like Yasuo does, where you Q 2 times and then your next Q is like transformed, where it's basically like Mordekaiser E. Where it will. I mean, it's similar to that, but it'll knock up and pull back. Kind of
Mm,
like it's like Mordekaiser E combined with Talia, like the W, the shove.
gotcha. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, but the champion looks pretty cool.
Okay. And that is it for this episode. Definitely consider tuning in for next week, guys. I mean, I guess I can't promise. I think there's going to be more roster stuff next week. It sounds like all the guys are getting ready to go. All the LEC Wooloos out there are just itching to release some rumors or release some moves, if you will. So I highly recommend tuning in next week. I'm sure we'll have some of that. Obviously, Worlds is still going on. There's going to be some really good series coming up this week. Also, we apologize for not getting the episode out earlier. We had some travel. J&T is sick. We had some things getting in the way, but we did our best to get you the episode as soon as we could, and so we did. So sorry that it was a little late, but yeah. Um, Last reminder: hit the subscribe button if you're enjoying the content. We appreciate you guys, and we'll see you guys next week. We think we're back on regular schedule. Is that J&T? What do you think?
Uh, yeah, I guess it makes sense because the quarterfinal
Probably on Monday.
matches go. Yeah, yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay, so tentatively, we think we're doing live on Monday again. So the episodes should come out at regular times. We'll see you guys next week. This has been episode 104 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. Goodbye.